call it order? Or
I'm going to call. I'm waiting on
Okay.
the live for you. Good evening and welcome to the November the 10th special meeting of the Gates County Board of Commissioners. I'm Dr. Anthony Riddick, the 2022 Chair of the Board. I'm joined by Commissioner Linda Hoffler, Vice Chair, Commissioner Jack Owens, Commissioner Ray Freeman, Commissioner Jonathan Craddock, County Manager Tim Wilson, and the County Attorney is absent this afternoon, as well as Ms. Jolitha Chestnut. We will be led in by prayer by the Chair. Let us stand. Heavenly Father, it's once again that we've gathered in this meeting space to conduct the business of the Gates County Board of Commissioners. We ask that you dwell with us just for a little while and that we continue to lead this county as you see fit. We pray, Heavenly Father, for those sick and shut in, but we especially pray for our colleague and our clerk, Ms. Jolitha Chestnut, who lost her father this morning. We know that all of us belong to you and you just called him home. As we leave this place, we pray for traveling mercies just like you gave us when we came. We ask that tomorrow morning you give us grace and mercy to work up one more time to make it right. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are grateful for the attendance of Mr. Rodney Tart of Green Engineering, and I'm going to turn it over to him. You can come to the podium and start your presentation. I believe he has a PowerPoint presentation, and he has handouts for us to follow.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guess I'm doing great. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Could you give me one for the board chair? The board clerk. She's not here.
Ma'am.
The board clerk, and I have one for the board clerk.
Sure.
Put it in the packet. Thank you.
Brad, need one? Okay, I talk sort of loud, so if I get too loud, just let me know.
It's okay.
I learned how to whisper in a sawmill. My roots are, I was raised on a 300-acre tobacco farm, and I've been working with Freedom ever since. All I know is how to work. I'm retired from 40 years of running a water system in Hardin County. It's my native county. I live there in Lillington, and I commute to Wilson every day. I work for Mr. Leo Green. And Leo and I go back years ago. And when I retired, he immediately hired me. And I guess one of my fortes that I bring to the company is my vast experience of building and running water systems. And I have evaluated a lot of them, and hopefully if we get funded with these grants that we've applied for, we'll be able to do some evaluation. So in the PowerPoint that I'm giving you, I named it Utility System as Evaluation and Asset Plan. And I'll get further in that in the moment. But first I wanted to review all the applications that we applied for you. As all of you know, the government printed a lot of money and they started giving it out, but it comes with criteria and application, and the whole process is very competitive. And there was probably the highest amount of applications in this round I guess there's ever been with the state. And for Gates County, we applied for $435,000 on your asset inventory and assessment, and $150,000 of that was just our field survey work, and $235,000 of that is to do a hydraulic model, and I will explain a little bit more about that in a moment. And you're required to do a rate study, so we had $48,000 in there. And then we applied for $2,000 as the maximum for y'all to file for reimbursement on any expense that y'all had on any training that y'all went to. When I first applied for this money, I thought it was going to be training that Green Engineering provided y'all, but they corrected me on that. So, Mr. Wilson, if you saved all the receipts, you ought to apply for that money and get it back. We also applied for $150,000 AIA for your sewer system. $75,000 of that is to do evaluations, soils evaluations and conditions on both of your waste treatment plants. The new one that's never been operated, and also the old existing one that was originally permitted for 25,000 gallons a day, and then it was derated because it was not in compliance. It was not being operated right, and it wasn't in compliance. And so they derated you because you had surface water running off. The sewer you were putting on the field was running off, and that's a violation. So one of the things that we're going to do, and hopefully we'll get the money to do that for free, and provide that service to y'all and evaluate what has to be done to see if we can regenerate the soils and get it back to where it'll receive that 25,000 gallons a day. That's today's rate. When you build a sewer treatment plant, it's costing about $30 a gallon. So you can multiply 10,000 a day times 30 and you see what kind of money you're talking about there for that. We also applied for $5.948 million to repipe the town of Gatesville, and the reason we did that is a lot of your system here is asbestos cement, and that is no longer allowed. No systems are doing that. We just got about $5 million for Woodville, Lewiston over in Bertie County, and we're getting ready to start the design on that pretty soon. So we're hopeful of that. And part of that 5.92 is you need a taller water tank so you can match up the head, the height, and the water pressure. And part of that AIA was to do a hydraulic analysis where we put all the water system into it and we model it and run this assumed flows and what the potential flows will be to determine where your pressure losses are. We've got some feedback from your fire departments while we were writing the grants, and also from what Brad and his staff has reported, and there is some pressure concerns. So we want to try to determine what that is and how we can upgrade and make whatever improvements are necessary to do that. We also applied for $243,000 to do a planning grant for wastewater in the town of Gatesville. Now, I don't know that anybody's requested that y'all do a wastewater construction project for the town of Gatesville, but here's where I'm coming from. From a management standpoint, that's the costliest enterprise you got, because you got very few customers on your sewer, and you've got expensive costs to operate it based on the flow that you got. So in thinking down the road, if you can get any free money to put in a collection system and get more sewer customers on, that's going to drive your unit cost down on your sewer fees. So that's the reason for that. And in wastewater, you need to be thinking 5 years out all the time. In water supply, you need to be thinking 50 years out all the time. So that's the reason we did that. We hope that we can get it, but there's no guarantee, because every one of these are competitive. I feel pretty strongly that you're going to get both of your AIAs, and it would really be a home run to get the $2.2 million we applied for to recondition and rehab the old wastewater plant and get it from the 10,000 it's been, or the 15,000 it's rated at now, and get it re-rated back up to 25,000. That all won't be done in one step. The first thing is to get it rehab, then get a year's operation in, and then prove to the state that it can run at the higher rate. And there may be other monies to do that. So, with that background, is there any questions on what I've said so far? Okay, hearing none, let's go to the first slide, Mr. Curry. All right, here's our key topics we want to talk about tonight. One of the biggest challenges in doing your applications was that you scored low. You had good projects. You had very good projects. But there's 4 categories. There's project purpose, there's project benefit, there's management, and there's affordability. Now, y'all's affordability was higher than I thought it would be. Out of 5 economic indicators, you were greater than the state. You were worse than the state benchmarks on 3 of those. So that gave you some points, but it would have been better if you'd have been 5 out of 5. But on the flip side of that, it's kind of nice that you're not 5 out of 5. You've only got 3, and so that can change just with economy and other impacts on operating your system. The other one, and one that was troubling to me, was water loss. Right now, you've got a tremendous water loss, and there's a reason for that, but we were not able to get the data and the information that we needed to really validate that. And then digging in further with that between the staff, we learned that you had about 1,000 of your water meters have been inoperable for some time. So that's like going into the hardware store and the cash register's broke, and you ask the people how much you owe them, and they say, I really don't know. Well, just give me some. The most equitable and the most fair way to charge for water and sewer service is on a unit volume basis. You come up with a unit cost of what that's going to be to meet your budget, and then you start charging for that. So we know that you're low in rates and you need to be much higher. It's no longer something that you can be proud and brag about. You got the lowest rates around. It's not, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. The other thing is developing an asset management plan, and an asset management plan is upwards of $350,000 to develop. If we get the money for the AIA, you're going to have $300,000 plus of that already paid for. So I'm not asking you to sign a contract tonight. I'm not trying to push you in any way. I'm just going to show you why it's so important when you're gaining points. Now you say, well, what is an asset management plan? Once we do the inventory and assessment of all your assets, we're going to know what the value of it is. We're going to know what the replacement value of that is. And then that's going to help you prepare capital improvement plans. And you got to have capital improvement plans so that you'll know how to set rates. You got your fixed costs, your variable costs, and your capital improvements. And so asset management plans are important to be able to, it's a useful tool to do that. And then the last thing is management. You got some very dedicated staff, and it was enjoyable working with them, but to some extent their hands is tied until the board can make some policy changes to give them the resources that they need. So with that, let's go to the next slide, Mr. Curry. And that's how to score well. Okay. This sheet right here is what's called system management, and it is part of the application process. On that whole page, the only thing I was able to claim for your county was 2 points. The max you can claim right now is 15 points. So you lost 12 points right there, which would have got you higher into the funding. If you could have got over into the 50s, that really strengthens your competition. So the asset management plan is something you really can't do until you get your inventory and assessment made to begin with. So I would say right now, your asset management plan, if you wanted to develop one, you're looking at a good 2 years before you would be ready to do that. The applicant has a current capital improvement plan. Mr. Wilson and Brad helped me. We put together a quick one. I don't know how comprehensive it is because we haven't done the assessment, but at least we've done enough to show the state that you had a capital improvement plan. And in today's world, you need a capital improvement plan, not only on your water system, but all your facilities like the courthouses and your other departments. You know, your ongoing maintenance, on kind of repairs. So in a capital improvement plan, you look at all the needs that you got and then you prioritize them. You put them in a priority of what's the most pressing. It's just like when you go to the doctor, you know, if you got 3 or 4 aches and pains, the doctor's going to put it in priority of what's the most pressing, what's going to keep you alive quickly and fastest. Okay, the next thing is your operating ratio. Now, just to cut down to the chase of that sounds like a fancy little 2 words, but how many of y'all in here actually personally run a business? Okay, so if you are spending more money than you take in, your operational ratio is going to be a negative number. If your operational ratio is a positive number, then you're getting a margin of return above your cost. Well, in the last 3 years and in years past, you've been running a negative operating ratio. And what's happening when you say, well, how do you keep running? Well, I'll show you in a minute a little analysis we did. But it's just like if you're on a fixed income and your costs keep going up, hopefully you put some rainy day money in the savings account. But if you don't never get an increase in income, that savings keeps dwindling down. And that's kind of where y'all are right now. The next thing, and the staff's already started on this, is a wellhead protection plan. And basically this is kind of like zoning, but it's not zoning. The heartbeat of your water system is your water supply, and without good water, you can't provide the service. So Gates County is not a booming metropolis, and you don't have development all around it. But where you've got water, you got wells, you want to make sure that your planning department is cognizant of that and that they are careful about letting anything come close to it. You know, so it's kind of a way of zoning out any types of businesses in a proximity of the area of influence where if there was a contamination or a spill on the surface of the ground, that it could get to your well. Because some of these things, like right now, Genex, you've heard about down on the Cakefield River into Wilmington. This compound, once it gets there, it never leaves. And so you don't want nothing like that to happen to your water supply, because right now your water quality on the 3 wells that you got is very good. Y'all don't have to do anything but chlorinate it.
What type of area, distance do you recommend to protect?
We don't do those, and the reason we don't do them is that you're a member of the North Carolina Rural Water Association. I used to be president of it, used to be president of the National State Association. They do it for you for free. All you got to do is ask. And they have hydrologists that work with them, and they'll come in. It'll take them 6-8 months to do it. And once they do it, they'll bring it before the board and y'all review it and you approve it. And what I'd recommend once you do that, then you get the planning department involved with that so they can help utility department manage that. But that's very important. Thank you for that question. That's a good question.
You're right. You would do that through zoning. It'd be an overlay type district.
Sir?
You would do it through your zoning as an overlay type district.
Yeah.
Within a vicinity
Yeah.
overlay.
You'll be surprised, Mr. Wilson, how many people have wellhead protection plans and the planning department's never heard about it. You know, it blows my mind. I'm dealing with a client right now. And I talked to their planning director and said, I don't know anything about it. I said, well, you're going to get to know about it, because you got to be kind of the policing for us behind that. Okay, another important one is, now this one takes a little bit more effort. Item 3C, that's the cheapest 5 points you'll ever get. Because Brad's got to call into the North Carolina Rural Water Association. You're on a calendar, and they will come out and do it. If y'all want to apply for funds in the spring round that's coming, you won't have it in time. Hopefully you can have it in time for the fall round if you need to apply for more funds then. Okay, application has implemented a water loss reduction plan. Now the North Carolina Rural Water will help you also get that started, but that is an ongoing active process. It's more than just going out and fixing a leak and filling out a report. You've got to have a bona fide water loss reduction plan. You've got to be actively pursuing the looking of leaks and fixing the leaks, and you kind of got to do it in a scientific way. North Carolina Rural Water Association will help you all the way through that. That's some of your tax dollars coming back to you. Some of your state and your federal tax dollars that's coming back to this county. It's there for the asking, just there for the asking. Okay, and the last one that I like, and I've helped a lot of systems on that, is the applicant has implemented a water conservation incentive rate structure. Well, when I first read that, when I was running my water, or my county's water system, I didn't like the sound of that because I said, I want to sell all the water I want, so I want them to use it. But it's really a conservation, and it encourages people, especially when they let their system get leaky and they don't manage it. And if you got rental property, tenants don't care. They just don't care. They'll just keep paying a higher bill and just keep right on with it. But the reason here is it is to encourage conservation. So here's the easy way you do that. You take your first 5,000 gallons of water, and you have a rate for like the first 2 or 3, and then the next 2, before you get to 5,000, you have like a 10 cents a 1,000 gallon jump, and that gives you 3 points. It's called a water conservation incentive. Very easy to do. So, is any questions on this sheet in scoring? Everything I've covered right here is things that y'all can do to get more points into management. Okay, next slide, please, Mr. Curry. Okay, Brad keeps good records on his water production, and last year y'all produced 306,902,000 gallons of water. The trouble came in when we tried to determine and reconcile your sales records. And the lady I can't remember, Daphne. I always want to call her Daphne. She hadn't slapped me on the phone yet, but I don't know why I want to call her Daphne. She had some problems trying to run consistent and repetitive sales reports. And I'm thinking that maybe this may be software related, and it may be time for a tune-up on your water utility software. Certainly, Brad needs to bring your software vendor in now, and we could set up a Teams meeting, Microsoft Outlook, something like that, and we could get you and Brad and Daphne and your software vendor together, and we could talk about it. But we never could, so I reached this number by taking what I thought to be the average of what most rural people use and then working backwards into it. That really comes up, I didn't do the math on this, but I think this is better than a 37% loss right now. Now, we know that you got 25% of your water meters don't work. So that's some of that right there. Okay, so if you're using 5,000 and all you're billing for is the minimum, then you're only getting, what, 40% of that, what you should be getting. The other issue is Brad says that you got a lot of leaks, and he's been working hard on fixing leaks. And I'll get a little bit more in detail about that in a minute. I've got an exhibit I want to show you on that. So your meters, your leaks, and your billing software are three big targets that need to really get concentrated on. Now, we made application for a meter project to replace all your meters. And of all the projects that the state provides money for, they are the least interested in funding grant or loan money for meter replacement, because they just feel like that the utilities should be looking after that business on their own and not having to go to them for the money. However, because y'all were classified as a distressed system, you're eligible to apply for it. So I talked to Mr. Wilson about it, and I said, we need to try to do something to show that the county is interested. So we committed in the grant $250,000 of your fund balance or your unrestricted net funds toward that, to show the reviewers, these people over here in Gates County are serious about it. They want to do something. Will that get you the money? I don't know. I don't know. I pray that it will. But if you don't get funded in this realm, then the best thing to do is then you set up local finance and you just go ahead and you finance it and just get on with it. So hopefully we'll know something in February. The reviewer told me if nobody else applied for a meter project of this type, that there was a fair chance that you get funded for it. So it's a wait and see game. We don't know. But that's how that came down. All right, next slide. Okay, here we go. We're talking about operating ratio. And definition of operating ratio is your total revenues, your total annual operating revenues divided by your expenses. That's your operating maintenance expense, your debt principal plus your interest plus your capital outlay. Now look at year 2021. At 2021, you had no debt, you had no debt interest, and you had no capital outlay, and you still were losing 6 cents out of every dollar you were spending. Okay? In 2020, you came up over that, and Miss Outland worked really hard. She wrote a nice paper trying to explain there was some transfer of monies back and forth, I think, in the construction of your new wastewater treatment plant. And I don't know if that's a true and fair picture, but that's as good as we could do it. And it showed a positive there. Then go to 2019, you had a 0.93. Now in this case, you had, look, notice here, you had a higher O&M expense. You had no debt, no interest rate, and you had $87,000 in capital outlay. And that $87,000 is not that much money, but in 1 year it could be considered a lot of money, but I'm sure there was a reason for that. The bottom line is your operating ratio was less than 1, and when you averaged the 3 years, you were less than 1. So we couldn't get no points for that. So why am I saying that? Two things y'all really need to really hammer in on is when an audit is presented to this board, is that you ask the hard questions. Just don't sit there and bob your head and say thank you and vote to approve it or receive it or whatever. You need to ask those questions. It's just like, okay, Mr. Auditor, how much money did we make this year? Well, in the utility business, it's not as much the word make it is what did we take, what was our margin of return up and above expenses? Okay? That's paramount of importance. And then from there, you look and see what your operating ratio is. That's just like going, how many of y'all get in an airplane in Raleigh-Durham and fly to California and not have an instrument panel so the pilot can see what's going on with that plane? When you're not looking at this, it's like getting in the car and driving to the beach with all the panel lights out on your panel. You don't know where you're going and what you're doing. And so y'all have to ask those hard questions to your auditor and to your staff. You got to ask those questions. And they're not really difficult. Now, there are certain times in your audit cycle that you spend more money than you normally will, like when certain payments come due. You may spend a certain percentage of a line item that is over, let's say you're 25% in your budget. You normally think, well, I'm going to spend about 25% on the quarter. And that doesn't always work out true for certain line items. Just like if you had debt and principal, those normally come due one time a year. So you make 100% of it in 1 month for your principal. Whereas if y'all got a mortgage on your house or your business, you're making that payment every month. But in utilities, typically, it's a one time a year payment. So that's that. Any questions on operating ratios? I'm not going to dwell on the next sheet other than to show you, if you failed your operating ratio, but your combined water and sewer rate exceeds 2.5% of your median household income, then you get the points for operating ratio. In your case, you didn't. And primarily the reason of that, one of the reasons is, well, your water rates were just too cheap. Your median household, your non-metropolitan median household income for Gates County is $45,871 a year. Okay, let's move along. All right, I asked Ms. Outland to prepare me a report. And basically what I did, we went back through all the audits back from 2015 to 2022. And you can see the unrestricted cash balance history. In 2015, you were 1.9, and you moved down to 1.8, and then right around the same the next year. And then in 2018, all of a sudden, you went up to 2.3. And I'm kind of guessing that 18 and 19 could have been part of that construction on your wastewater plant. You weren't here then, were you, Mr. Wilson? So you really can't speak on that, but that's what Ms. Outland and I's kind of our guess was, that some money was transferred in, and that could have been some general fund money. I don't know. And then in 2020, it dropped by almost $600,000. And then in 2021, it dropped another 100,000. And then she's estimating, as of right now, you're down to somewhere around $850,000. So your gas tank is getting empty. So what does all that mean? It means you need to get your water rates, up. You know you need to be putting fund balance. When I looked at, let's see if I got this here. I'm gonna hand y'all this right quick. Just indulge with me a minute here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe two there, I can't. Just share one. We'll just keep one for the clerk if
Yes.
you need it. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I'm gonna ask this question to the board members, so Mr. Wilson, you can't respond unless they cry wolf. Okay, this is the year ending June 30, 2021 for your proprietary funds. Your proprietary funds is your water and sewer. And if you look at a water fund, that's the second column in the middle of the page, you come down through there, and can anybody tell me if the water system made money that year? I'm gonna give you a clue.
No, we didn't
No.
make money because the operation costs are high.
That's right. If you look at your revenues and you look at your expenses, and then the more revealing is the net change in position. You went under $397,000. Now, what I would encourage you to do is to get with Mr. Wilson and get with Ms. Outland. They're very competent people, and sit down and y'all talk more about your budget and your audit, and make sure that you understand and prepare yourselves when the audit is presented to you by the CPA firm, that you're ready to ask some hard, tough questions and make them tell you. If they can't tell you, they're not doing their job. Always after a big audit, I had them to come in, and we spent an hour just talking. I wanted to really get a good understanding of what was going on in the utility. You also note here that you had a depreciation figure, that's up under operating expenses, of $278,387. And that's basically a paper loss. There wasn't a check written for that and carried over to the bank and put in the bank for that $278,000. But here's what I want to make the point of you. If you truly fund your depreciation, that ends up being part of your margin and return. If you set your rates to harvest that money and you set it aside in the depreciation bucket, it's going to grow your unrestricted cash or your fund balance. Okay? And you don't need to make an apology to the public about that. You are saddled with the responsibility of making sure that this water system is ran correctly, meets all the environmental compliance conditions, protects the public health of the people, provides fire suppression, and is financially sound. And there's probably 150 or 60 water systems in North Carolina right now that receive the distress classification, and there's probably that many more that's under risk right now. And that's because the boards did not raise the rates and keep a hand on the blood pressure and the gas tank and all of that. And y'all have to balance and shuffle a lot of things, but you've got a lot of asset here, and you should be proud of what you've got, and I'm sure a lot of grant dollars, because you're debt-free. I mean, on that, you have no debt on your water system. That's why you're not, when you looked at the operational ratio, there was no debt payment, no principal, or no interest. And it's time to start reinvesting in your system. Hopefully we'll get some grants. If we get some grants, that'll transfer into equity in your system, because you got an asset there and it's already paid for. But generally, most components in a water system, pipe and water tanks, are typically 50-year depreciation. Pumps, wells, and sewer pumping stations and things like that are 20 years. Water meters are normally 20 years. Some water systems now changing out meters in 12 years to get the maximum revenue. So I want to make that point to you because I think it's important. All right, let's move to the next one. Okay, I talked about asset management plan. There's 4 key components of an asset management plan, and those are the inventory of the assets, including the maps, and the asset condition of the infrastructure. That's what we're going to do when you get funded for your asset grant. Brad came to me and says, we want to do an asset inventory and condition assessment. And I said, certainly. And I said, but you're entitled to make other applications for things. So once we get into it, we'll determine some of your needs, and we'll try to write grants around that. And the reason I'm going to all this trouble, and I don't mean it that it's trouble, I'm going to all of this reporting is to encourage you that you need to enhance your financial condition. And the only way you can do that is, you got to fix your meters, and you're going to have to raise your rates. That's two things you got to do. Just to fund your depreciation, just to fund that $278,000 a year, that's $5 a month right there. And that should be tacked on to your minimum bill. Now, once we get the AIA approved, we'll do a more comprehensive rate study, and that'll all be paid for by grant. But I would encourage you right now, it would take to spend $2 million right now on meters, to amortize that over 20 years, if you borrowed it from the state, that would be $2 a month right there. It would take $2 a month per connection just to pay for that. Another thing is where you got the large water users like your schools, they should be paying the equivalent of how many, like a 3/4 inch is a typical residential service. Some of these schools may have a 2, a 3, or a 4. So you do the computation on that, and in some instances that may be 50 times a standard, so they ought to be paying 50 times in their base charge. Just things like that. We'll explore all these things once we get the grant funding. But I'm encouraging you right now to have a dialogue and get some money started. So if you don't get funded for the meter project in February, you'll have a cash flow already set up to go to the banks, and start and borrow the money and start servicing that debt and getting that done. You ought to be able to get that project done within a year or less. The capital improvement plan is a part of this. That's only going to get more and more refined as we get deeper into your asset inventory and assessment. And then the last thing is we'll write a operation and maintenance plan. And then that'll enhance Brad's team's management. All right, the next one is asset management records. Okay, on this slide right here, this is just a dummy report. These streets don't even all exist in Gates County. I just put that down. It's important that the utility staff from now to eternity, every time they have a water leak, is they identify where it is, the line size, what type of leak it is, if it's a main break, or if it's a meter, or whatever. If some asset in your system fails, you need to identify that. You need to estimate the water loss. You need to estimate, well, it's not an estimate, you'll know what your material and your labor is. So you put that labor and that material cost in there, and you come up with a total cost to make that repair. And that comes out in dollars and cents. Now, they did that over in Bertie County, had done a good job on that. I encouraged Mr. Spivey to start that when they merged that system, and that got him, that sealed the deal because it had those records. Now, why else is that important? I had a project one time, it was about 125 miles of pipe. And for whatever reason, all the service tubing that went from the main to the meter base in the people's yards, we started identifying pinholes, little leaks, and it just kept getting worse and worse. We had the records on that, and then we went back to the manufacturer of that product, and we got some help. We didn't get it all, but we got some help. Had we not had that, we wouldn't have got anything. So for grant and loan purposes and for management purposes and any other kind of assistance potential you will have at. Plus, you need to know if you've got, if you got a whole lot of leaks on a water line, there'll come a time when you'll determine that it's cheaper to replace the line it is to keep fixing leaks. So that's the reason for that. Any questions on that exhibit? Okay, here's the next one, and this is important. How many of y'all reconcile your checkbook every month? Okay. The staff needs to reconcile your water inventory. Like when we go back to that slide earlier where we looked at water loss, we're going to look at the amount of water you produce. We're going to look at the amount of water you sold. We're going to break that down in meter routes. Okay, and you'll be able to identify, where your water's going, and then you're going to end up crunching that out at the end. You're going to be able to crunch that out in the cost. I don't think I put that in this one right here. This is all in gallons, but you can take this further and make another column, and you can take those gallons that was lost, and you just multiply that times your cost per thousand that you're selling it for. And that tells you what kind of money you're losing. Now, I think once you get those meters put in, you're going to start closing that gap, but that's not going to be all of it. And so I'm encouraging you, the board, to make sure that the utility department starts this practice as well as the exhibit before this one to start doing those. Those are good management policy and ideas, and it helps you know where you're going and where your money is going and how your costs are mounting up. It's just good management practice. Okay, that's pretty much where I wanted to talk about, and I'll just open it up for any kind of other questions you may have with the information I provided.
I wanted to ask a question. You were over around page 2. Purpose, there were four things. Purpose, benefit, 2 other words I didn't get.
On which page are you on?
Well, it's not actually on the page, but you were on page 2 when you were talking.
On the key topics?
Yeah.
Okay.
You said purpose, benefit, and the...
Okay, there's 4 categories
Right.
in these applications: project purpose, project benefit, management, and affordability.
Okay.
And the affordability indexes, all that's already been worked out, and they got a sheet. And what you do when you put Gates County in there, it automatically knows what your percent poverty is. It already knows what your tax value is per capita. And then you plug in your annual budget revenues and your annual expenses and your debt service principal payment. And then you plug in your project costs, and it'll spit out a number. And it'll tell you it'll tell you then how that impacts your operating ratio, and then from that, it computes how much grant you're eligible for.
Our status, and we're in there with a lot of other counties and
Right.
municipalities. And, it's not a great situation, but the timing of it with the assistance and the money that's out there available, has worked out to our favor, I think.
Yeah.
The grant, we're talking about a lot of activity to do everything that we're talking about here. You know what the time frame on the grant?
Okay, that's another good
How long do you
question.
have to spend it?
These ARPA funds, and this is the troubling part to me as an engineer and also as a previous utility manager, This money's got to be spent by 2026. It's got to get designed, it's got to get out on the street, it's got to be bid, advertised, and what nobody's told me yet, what if the job comes in over the estimate? What do you do then? Where does that money come from? Or do you start looking at ways you can cut to get it in the money? Anything that you can get that's free, and you can adjust it to keep it in the money and keep a project is worth doing. But 2026 is the hard line. December 31, 2026, you're supposed to have this work done. So that's a tall order, because you know the government just don't operate that fast. Now, you can operate a little bit faster than that at the local level, but when you get higher up, those wheels turn slow.
And Mr. Tarp, I think one of the other challenges I've heard with all the meetings is that with the ARPA funds, you have to encumber it, or you have to have a project by 2024, and it has to be done by 2026. So as I look at all of this, and I've seen some of this before, I'm talking with you and your company, time is of the essence.
Time is up.
We cannot wait and try to pray over this for another year or 2 years, because 2024, the finance officer has to submit those projects.
Right.
For ARPA funds.
And be approved.
So what'll happen, Mr. Wilson will receive a letter. It may be to your attention, but
It will.
that letter will come to him, and it'll tell you whether y'all been awarded or not. And then they're going to give you a calendar of events that have to occur. And if you miss one of those calendar dates, you're out of there. So we're in the process right now of the spring round, writing the preliminary engineering reports for projects just like Bertie County on that one that they got awarded. That's a big project for them. That's a $5 million project. That's a nice sized project. So time is of the essence. And Mr. Wilson and I have had very frank conversations about your meter replacement. And that's why I think it's timely that you go ahead before the first of the year and really get a rate increase. And I would recommend that you put it on your base, and don't put it in your commodity. I'd put it in the base, so that you know you're going to get it. If there's a water tap there, they're going to get a bill, and you're going to get that money. And you try to earmark some of that. And if you want to go a little bit more than that, that's fine too, because you really want to. You want to try to fund your depreciation and make sure you get your capital project funded. So I would treat this meter project just like it was a true capital project, and you were going to borrow $2 million or whatever to do it, and you know what it's going to take to pay for it. And then if you get the grant or some portion of it, any of that payment that you would have had to pay can now go over into the depreciation bucket. And then that ends up being unrestricted cash. So you can build that up. You know, most utilities, if they're run real good, they'll have so much unrestricted cash or savings. Unrestricted cash that's a CPA. They went 6 or 7 years to be able to
Say that.
claim that and say that. But to me, it's savings. It's what you got left over after you meet all your costs. Some utilities are able to take a portion of that and make improvements so they don't have to borrow it all. You know. One other thing I'm going to leave you with, and you got between now and your budget in June, is start thinking about, and it took me 15 years to influence my board to do it, and it was a bold step, is at least increase your rates every year by the consumer price index. Now, for the last 10 years, it's averaged about 1.85. Now, God only knows what it's going to be the next. You know, we already know this year it's 8.5. So, and I don't know that 8.5 right now would even be enough for you to do what you want to do just on meters. I haven't run the math on that, but that's a conversation y'all need to have. You just need to huddle up and talk about it. But just be prepared mentally that you know you got to do something. I'd encourage you to go ahead and do something now. And then once we get the project funded, then we can go deeper into capital improvement plan and also a detailed rate analysis so that the rates will be equitable and be fair. That's the main thing. Any other questions? Well, I thank you for your time, and I hope it don't rain too hard on me getting back. What are they calling for up here? Are y'all calling for much rain?
An inch.
A few hours of
Isn't it about an inch? That we're
I
supposed to
see
get?
some of the prettiest cotton coming up into here I've seen anywhere in the state.
Yeah,
Beautiful cotton.
great year for us.
Yeah. You heard about the farmer, he'd buried his uncle that day, and his uncle left him $1 million. His wife was sitting there washing the dishes, and he was reading the paper at the dinner table. And she said, "John, what are we going to do now that Uncle Bob died and left us that $1 million?" He said, "I just guess we'll keep on farming until the money runs out." Well, y'all been kind, and thank you for your questions, and we look forward to working with you, and just pray that y'all get some funding.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, just give me a holler if you need anything.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for coming. And I'm sure there's a million questions we'll think of after you leave.
All right. All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.